If you're running Windows 11 and potentially Windows 10 and all previous versions of Windows, there's a way of bypassing most of the stupid, unnecessary requirements that Microsoft Corporation put in because companies that install on thousands of computers can't fill out one after another a Microsoft Internet account or some other stuff like that. Microsoft Corporation is by definition a monopoly and is not legally allowed to do these things, but the U.S. government simply doesn't enforce this, and a bunch of you out there don't think they should because you hate government, but that's the reason you're in this pickle, and that's why you're watching the video. We're going to be doing a set of edits that allow for unsupported usage of computers that don't have trusted platform modules, or you want to turn it off, secure boot, or you want to turn it off, CPU and RAM checks, and more important than all of them, bypassing the enrollment through out-of-box experience in Microsoft Corporation. We're going to be using a set of keys in the registry if we can. It may require a reboot after this edit, but if it doesn't work, then you'll have to do command prompt activity and maybe redo them. We're going to be taking advantage of a subsection that's found in, for instance, in my copy of Windows 7 called Mosetup, and another one called LabConfig under the setup category or key for Windows setup when it's initially built. This is where certain settings are left in, and depending on which one you picked for home version, pro, whatever, these get different versions of that, as well as different file sets, and maybe different versions of the setup utility itself. But all of this exploits something important: the system account. We're going to be using command prompt inside of Windows setup. Now, if you're not aware of it, the command prompt, even the user command prompt you're not supposed to be able to access, should be in there somewhere because the operating system uses commands back and forth between services and systems and between programs it's running. For instance, let's say you have an OEM build with a built-in setup for a video game, some tie-in deal. All of these have to be able to run at least through a command prompt. And because it's at startup with setup, it's almost always running the system account. The system account has total control over the computer. It does not do any checks and balances. It's basically you're running without a net. And the system account has to have access to the command prompt. And by definition, if you're running setup, it is running that command prompt. Also, by definition, if your computer is able to start and tell you, your computer's too dumb for me to be able to use it or install to it, that also means it obviously is running Windows perfectly fine, it just doesn't feel confident in doing an install. If you're building a new video card and you need to test it, it's going to say the video card's incompatible and refuse to start. You need to turn that shit off. So I'm going to include those in here as well. Now, you are allowed in the operating system, if you're an OEM builder, to just create a local account on a clean install, and this is done by a registry setting that's for OEMs. We're going to emulate that. I have to warn you, unless you've signed an actual contract as a business entity or an individual, a written contract with it's notarized and witnessed, you have not signed a contract with Microsoft Corporation. Click-wrap licenses are virtually impossible to ever enforce in any practical way. Some countries allow it. The United States has been frowning on this for a long time. You do not have an opt-in versus opt-out legal requirement. Nobody reads the contract, so the contract's not enforceable. That's not what's going on. But in this case, it really is like that. Microsoft Corporation changing shit on the fly and not giving you the opportunity to opt out or fix things, that's not acceptable. So anyway, we're going to be allowed to make a local account and a clean install by altering the registry on the fly during setup. It'll read it again. And also, depending on how the install works, where it dumps data on the hard drive, it may actually just read it from the hard drive, which is what we want. We're going to cause the out-of-box experience, otherwise known as the user or loser experience, to alter so it doesn't require a network enrollment or association with Microsoft Corporation or an account in Microsoft. You can resume by entering a name. I recommend you type in admin or administrator for the name and no password. This is not really the administrator account on anything after Windows, I think Windows Vista. There was a real administrator account you can't access, and that's basically what's supposed to replace the system account. But they still haven't fully replaced it, so we're going to still hack. You hit Shift+F10, and that gives you a command prompt. Now, if you do this at any time during the setup, it may or may not work. It may auto-close it, depending on what patches Microsoft decides to do. But so far, so good. It works. During the installation process, as early as possible, do that. Then type in regedit. See if it lets you run it. And that's the first step. So we're going to alter the registry. We're either going to be able to do it through regedit, or we're going to do a long command prompt. The command prompt is a long string of code that you have to get exactly right, or it will just not work, or it'll break your registry. But we're going to do it by that method first, just because we're going to get that out of the way. You press Shift+F10, get a command prompt during the installation process, and before it's accessed the internet for even drivers if possible. And then you type regedit, hit enter, and wait. Once it comes up, you locate and or make the following key sets. Now I'm going to describe them, and they're long strings of characters sometimes. All of these are under HKey local machine. One set of keys or key is under system. The other one is under another one called software. So look in system first. So HKey local machine system, then you go software, Microsoft Windows, CurrentVersion, OOBE. If there isn't a key there, you make a new key or make a new subkey or whatever. And then we're going to put in a D word, and it's going to be called bypassnro, and we're going to make it have a value of 1. That means it bypasses the eNROllment. NRO stands for enrollment. Now, that bypasses the enrollment, which should get rid of the entire requirement. It should just let you skip using the sign up for Microsoft Corporation. And you might have to unplug your network cable at a specific point to get it to shut up about it, because it just says, oh, you don't have a network hookup. Okay, we'll just continue on and you can do it later. And it calls it a limited install. It's not. It's just that it's not allowing you to tie in Microsoft software, which you might want to do, but you don't have to. And if I'm a technician working on a bench or building this for you, I can't. It's not acceptable behavior on the system. Next, we're going to emulate partially the OEM or no TPM or Secure Boot extended Windows 11 installation thing. This is just yet another configuration or profile for the install where it turns off a bunch of stuff. If you're not aware of it, TPM is Trusted Platform Module, and Secure Boot is something a lot like it that makes it to where both of those can be used potentially or hypothetically to secure your system to keep it from getting broken into. You can hard encode it if you want to. However, Trusted Platform Module is mostly so Microsoft Corporation could lock out other operating systems. It's not required, and I disabled it because I don't want it being able to interfere with me booting. Same thing with Secure Boot, I turned it off. If I needed Secure Boot, I would make it to where I would do it, and then I would encrypt each operating system so they can't interfere with each other. That's useful if you're doing operating systems that might accidentally break each other or on purpose. Now, this one is under, you have to look into the registry again, HKey local machine system setup. And you're going to edit or add in LabConfig and Mosetup. Mosetup is found on Windows 7 on my machine. LabConfig seems like a laboratory environment for testing hardware, but I don't have any information on it. These two are used the following ways. Under LabConfig, we're going to put in the bypasses for several things. These are checks and bypasses. We're going to bypass TPMCheck and give it a value 1. BypassSecureBootCheck, give it a value 1. Now we're going to bypass CPUCheck and RAMCheck, both giving them 1. And all of these are potentially dangerous or unwise, but if you're doing it on a blank hard drive, all this does is it makes it to where it stops doing that during setup or maybe forever. And again, you can do this so that, in my case, I can pull my hard drive out and plug it into any computer. I'm using Windows 7 and Ultimate. I've told it not to do hardware checks. I've told it not to encode anything by hardware. I had to type in a number for it, which is a pain in the ass. I had to give it a hash code. But it makes it to where when I plug the hard drive into another machine, it doesn't say your machine's invalid. It just shuts up and works. I can't have the thing have any downtime. So I always have a computer over to the side that doesn't have a hard drive in it, so I can slap it in. Because I got tired of dealing with Microsoft's bullshit a long time ago. Now we're going to do also HKey local machine system setup, Mosetup. It has AllowUpgradesWithUnsupportedTPM and or CPU. Now it has it written out a specific way, upper lower case is important, and it has a value of 1. That just means we're turning off all of the checks and we're allowing it to upgrade or run on a machine that's missing certain features. And this is what you use for Pro all the way down to Home version. And remember, during the setup, it's going to try to access the internet, and it's going to try to demand that you update it so that it can keep you from being able to do these things. So as soon as possible, hit Shift+F10, get a command prompt up, and try to type in these commands. Now, you can also edit a file that's called bypassnro, just like the thing we typed in. Inside of that, it does exactly one of those commands. We can add in all the others. And also, it does a reboot, which we don't want to do necessarily. We can reboot manually. So what we do is now this is going to be the part that's complicated. We're going to use add on the reg function. Instead of regedit, we're going to do reg space add. And that will let us put in a key name and then value names, types, data, and no prompt or whatever. We don't really need to do that. And I'm going to go ahead and do that in a minute at the end of the video, because I'm going to read back what you can just read below, and you're going to have to cut and paste it into a batch file anyway. You can edit that batch file. It's actually a CMD file. You can type edit C:\Windows System 32/OOBE/bypassnro.cmd and cut and paste these instructions in. You could even include it on a thumb drive and then drag it over as a full replacement copy. So we're going to skip all that. It's down below. I'll read it back to you if I got time. But here we go. You may have to kill off the network connection flow process. This is the sign-up utility to sign you up with Microsoft Corporation. It's not the auto-updates internet hookup. This is the separate thing they added on to annoy people. When it asks for an internet connection, so that you can log in and become part of the hive mind and the Snorlax, you can unplug your network cable, and it may or may not work. You can also emulate this, or you might have to do these steps I'm going to give you to get it to shut up and acknowledge the network isn't available. Skip it. Now remember, all of those things we just gave it should have kept this from happening, but it might not work. Try rebooting anyway, but if it didn't work, you press Shift+F10, get a command prompt, and type task kill, one word, space /f/im/OOBE, that's out of box experience, network connection flow.exe. Or in my case, I would find the damn thing and erase or corrupt it. I don't know if that would work. Somebody needs to get rid of this thing. And all it is it's like an AOL setup that won't go away. I mean, seriously, what the fuck? Anyway, you're going to have to keep that command prompt window open, and you're going to have to practice going back and forth between the command prompt and the Windows setup utility, back and forth with Alt or Control or Shift tab or whatever. And when you do that, it's going to restart that damn thing. It's a TSR. And I don't know if it's being run as a service or not. If it is, you could run Microsoft Services routine if it's in there and maybe terminate it and keep it killed. But anyway, you have to hit the up arrow and hit enter to rerun that command. You may have to do it 5 to 10 times. If it doesn't let you do it, if it won't let you skip it, it may have updated to the point you can't get past this. You can resume after this if you finish, again, by entering a name. I'd recommend admin or administrator, and then put in no password, and use it for the rest of the software setup and hardware setups to get everything done on your computer before you have your account. And then you set up your account on your computer, and you can make sure your account's an administrator. Go back in and have it erase the admin account you built if you want to. Or you can put a password on it afterwards. I recommend you do that because that will make sure it always starts. And you close the command prompt window in any case after you've done all that. Now I'm going to read back the commands that are actually used to cause this file, this batch file. This is the commands in it. One of them is called regadd HKLM, HK local machine, system setup, and Mosetup. And then there's another one for LabConfig. And then after that, it does the same thing. It says HKAdd, blah, 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 Mosetup. And then it says space /v for the value. And we're going to put in AllowUpgradesWithUnsupportedTPMOrCPU. That's the value. And then we put in /t, and that's for type, and it says reg dword. It's a data word. And then after that, it will have /d for the data, 1. That's the command prompt. Now, all of that's going to be listed below, and hopefully YouTube's description editor doesn't screw it up completely. You'll have to clean it up, probably, but it should work, and you can do all those commands one at a time, God help you, or you can cut and paste them into a batch routine, which is what I'd recommend. Or you can make it something.cmd as a text file and just run it, and it should do this. And all this does is alter the registry to turn off a bunch of checks and turn off its ability to demand you sign up with Microsoft Corporation. So I'm including that, and yes, I stole this from a bunch of websites, but I'm putting it together as one file. And you could add in more of them. And yes, you could stick it into that bypass utility command file because it's been given permissions too. It has permissions associated with it. So if you edit it, you might be able to put in a whole bunch of hacks in here that would make your life a lot easier and make the install work without whining and complaining. Anyway, that's about it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. And I wish you all a great deal of luck. Warning, I'm not responsible if this breaks your computer because it might.